The scent of turpentine and old paper was Ilara's solace, a comforting embrace in the small community art studio she poured her life into. Art for All was more than just a name, it was her gospel. Mondays, she patiently taught children to mix vibrant hues, their clumsy strokes filling her with a quiet joy. Tuesdays, she guided seniors through the delicate dance of watercolor, their trembling hands finding unexpected grace. And the rest of the week? Well, that was a whirlwind of everything else. Ilara, 32, with eyes that held the warmth of 1,000 sunsets and a smile that rarely faltered, believed in the inherent good in people. She lived by it. If someone needed help, her first instinct wasn't to weigh the cost, but to extend her hand. It was simply how she was built. If a fellow artist needed a canvas stretched by tomorrow, her yes was immediate, even if it meant staying up until 2 in the morning. If a neighbor needed a lift to the market across town, her keys were already in her hand before they finished asking. Ilara, you're a godsend. Mrs. Henderson, a sweet-faced woman with a penchant for abstract pastels, would often exclaim, her voice thick with gratitude. Ilara would just blush, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. This was her purpose, wasn't it? To make the world a little brighter, one act of kindness at a time, but lately, a subtle shift had begun, a faint discord in the harmonious hum of her life. It was a faint whisper, a persistent, almost imperceptible ache beneath the surface of her constant giving. There was the lingering fatigue from those late nights, the quiet exasperation when a friend conveniently forgot to pay back that small loan again. Or the growing pile of tasks at the studio that she would somehow always get to, because no one else seemed to have the time, or the willingness. Just last week, Sarah, a vibrant but often flaky colleague, had called. Ilara, you are the only one who can save me. My pottery class registration is due tomorrow, and I'm swamped. Could you just handle it for me? You're so organized. Ilara's stomach had done a familiar clench. She had her own overwhelming list, but the thought of Sarah struggling, the image of those excited new students missing out, it was too much. Of course, Sarah, she'd said, her voice a little tired even to her own ears. Don't worry about it. Sarah had been effusive in her thanks, but the next day, while Ilara was meticulously inputting data, Sarah had breezed in, coffee in hand, chatting happily about her weekend plans. Not a single offer to help, not even a casual, thanks again for that. Ilara had brushed it off, telling herself Sarah was just busy, oblivious. But a tiny, cold pebble had lodged itself somewhere in her chest. The first major crack in Ilara's carefully constructed facade of unwavering optimism came in the form of Leo. He arrived at Art for All like a sudden, dazzling splash of color, charismatic, charming, with a story for every occasion and a laugh that could fill a room. He introduced himself as a freelance graphic designer, struggling to get his passion project, a sprawling mural for a local youth center, off the ground. Ilara, he'd said, his dark eyes earnest, you have such an incredible energy. I've heard so much about your dedication to the community. This mural, it's for the kids who have nothing. But I'm just drowning in the logistics. I need help coordinating volunteers, getting supplies, just someone to believe in the vision and help me pull it all together. Ilara, her heart swelling with the magnitude of his ambition and the worthiness of his cause, had readily agreed. Anything, Leo. Anything I can do to help. And she did. She rearranged her schedule, dedicating entire afternoons to making phone calls, tracking down donations, and even sketching preliminary designs based on Leo's vague ideas. She spent her evenings driving across the city to pick up donated paint and brushes. Her own small studio, her personal sanctuary, began to feel neglected. Her once full sketchbook lay forgotten. Initially, the work felt exhilarating. Leo was full of praise, his enthusiasm infectious. "You're a lifesaver, Elara. I couldn't do this without you." These words were like fuel, igniting her desire to work even harder. She genuinely believed in the project, in the impact it would have on the kids, but as the weeks bled into months, the initial glow began to fade, replaced by a dull ache of exhaustion. Leo's drowning in logistics seemed to mean he was always just out of reach, always just a bit too busy to return her calls, always just a little too late to meetings. He'd show up for the big photo ops, flash his dazzling smile, and then disappear, leaving Elara to handle the inevitable chaos. She found herself making excuses for him to others, and even to herself. "Oh, Leo's just so passionate, he loses track of time." Or, "He's got so many big ideas, the details just aren't his strong suit." But the pebble in her chest was growing heavier, harder. She was doing 90% of the work, yet Leo was taking all the credit. Local newspaper articles about the mural prominently featured Leo's name, with Elara relegated to a brief mention as a dedicated volunteer. The injustice burned, a hot, unfamiliar sensation. But she swallowed it down. Good people didn't complain. Good people just did. Just as the mural project was consuming her, Anya re-entered Elara's life, a storm of perpetual crisis. Anya, Elara's childhood friend, had always been a little dramatic. But lately, her problems seemed to have escalated. Anya was unemployed, struggling with rent, and constantly in a new dysfunctional relationship. And Elara was her emotional lifeline. "Elara, I don't know what I'd do without you," Anya would sob into the phone, often late at night. "Everyone else just judges me. You're the only one who understands." Elara would listen, patiently, for hours. She offered advice she knew wouldn't be taken, provided comfort she knew would be temporary. She lent money for emergencies, groceries, utility bills, a sudden medical expense, money she rarely saw again. She helped Anya write resumes, despite her own deadlines looming. She drove Anya to appointments, even when it meant rescheduling her own. The more Elara gave, the more Anya seemed to need. There was no reciprocity, no asking, "How are you, Elara?" No offers to help at the studio, even in small ways. Anya's gratitude was fleeting, quickly replaced by the next crisis, the next demand. Elara felt like a human sponge, absorbing Anya's endless despair, left wrung out and empty at the end of each conversation. She started to dread Anya's calls, seeing the caller ID fill her with a weary resignation. This feeling, she knew, was not kind. It was not good. And the guilt gnawed at her, adding another layer to the growing weight on her shoulders. Why was she so exhausted, so resentful, when all she was doing was being a good friend? The mural's grand unveiling was supposed to be a triumph. Elara had worked tirelessly, overseeing the final touches, coordinating the youth center's modest celebration. She stood at the back, a quiet observer, watching the beaming children and proud community members admire the vibrant artwork. She felt a flicker of pride, despite the lingering bitterness. Then, the local mayor took the stage. "And now, I'd like to introduce the visionary behind this incredible project, a true artist and community leader, Leo Maxwell." Leo strode forward, basking in the applause. He took the microphone, his smile dazzling, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. He spoke eloquently about his vision, his dedication, his late nights poring over designs. He recounted anecdotes that were entirely Elara's experiences, presenting them as his own. "Of course," he added, almost as an afterthought, gesturing vaguely towards Elara, "I had some wonderful volunteers who helped with the logistics. A huge thank you to Elara for her dedication." Just Elara. Not Elara, the co-coordinator, or Elara, who spent countless hours. Just, Ilara, swallowed by the wave of his self-congratulation, the words hit Ilara like a physical blow. The air rushed out of her lungs. It wasn't just the lack of credit, it was the casual, almost dismissive way he'd swept her efforts aside, making her feel utterly invisible. The pebble in her chest exploded into a shard of ice, sharp and searing. Betrayal. It was a cold, hard truth. Later that week, still reeling from the mural unveiling, Ilara finally tried to set a boundary with Anya. Anya had called, demanding Ilara drop everything to pick her up from an inconvenient location. Anya, Ilara began, her voice trembling slightly. I can't today. I have a major deadline for the studio, and I'm really behind. Maybe you could take a bus, or call a rideshare. Silence. Then, Anya's voice, cold and brittle, cut through the phone. Wow. After everything I'm going through? I guess I know where I stand. Some friend you are. I thought you cared about me, Ilara. But I guess I was wrong. The accusation hung in the air, a poison dart. Ilara's stomach churned. The guilt, always her oldest companion, rushed in, suffocating her. Anya hung up. Ilara stared at her phone, her heart pounding. The little voice in her head screamed, "You're selfish. You're a bad friend. See? This is what happens when you're not kind enough." Tears welled up, blurring the lines of her studio, the vibrant colors suddenly muted and dull. She sat on the floor amidst her art supplies, feeling utterly alone, utterly drained. Her kindness, her most cherished quality, felt like a gaping wound. Why did this keep happening? Why did her earnest desire to help, to be good, always seem to boomerang back as pain, exploitation, and belittlement? She had given so much of herself, and now there was nothing left but this raw, aching emptiness. The quiet of her studio, once a bomb, now felt like a vast, echoing chamber amplifying her pain. The vibrant paints and inviting canvases mocked her, remnants of a joy that felt utterly alien. Ilara hadn't picked up a brush in days, the mere thought of creating something beautiful feeling like a betrayal of the emptiness gnawing at her. Her hands, usually so busy, lay limp in her lap as she stared at the wall, seeing nothing but the flashing replay of Leo's dismissive gesture, Anya's cutting words, "Why?" The question was a raw whisper, barely audible even to her own ears. It clawed at her, relentless. Why me? Why does this keep happening? She prided herself on being kind, on being helpful, on seeing the good in everyone. Wasn't that supposed to be rewarded? Wasn't that the path to connection, to appreciation? Instead, it felt like a target painted on her back. Every act of generosity, every sacrifice, now seemed like a foolish misstep. The sleepless nights spent on the mural, the loans that vanished into Anya's endless needs, the emotional labor she'd poured into people who'd casually walked away, it all coalesced into a suffocating blanket of resentment. And then came the crushing guilt, a familiar shadow. You're being petty. You shouldn't expect anything in return. That's not true kindness. The internal battle raged, leaving her exhausted and bewildered. She felt like a broken instrument, incapable of producing the harmonious notes of generosity she so desperately wished to play. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by fragmented dreams where she was perpetually reaching, always falling short, or being pushed away. Food tasted like ash. The phone, once a source of connection, now felt like a coiled snake, ready to strike with another demand she couldn't refuse. She started ignoring calls, letting them go to voicemail, then deleting them unheard. This was a new, terrifying part of herself, withdrawn, resentful, and utterly lost. The vibrant Ilara was dimming, fading into a monochrome existence. One particularly heavy afternoon, a week after the mural debacle, Elara found herself wandering aimlessly through the older parts of the city. The usual bustling streets seemed too loud, too bright. She craved shadows, quiet, a place where she didn't have to pretend to be okay. She found herself drawn down a narrow, cobbled lane she'd never noticed before, tucked between a bustling spice shop and a crumbling tea house. The air grew cooler here, the sounds of the city muted. At the end of the lane stood a small, unassuming building, its facade covered in ivy so thick it almost obscured the chipped wooden sign, Silas's Studio and Curios. Curiosity, a flicker of her old self, pricked through her numbness. She pushed open the heavy oak door, a faint chime announcing her presence. The interior was a mesmerizing labyrinth of artistic creation. Canvases leaned against walls, some half-finished, others bursting with abstract forms and vibrant colors. Sculptures crafted from driftwood and found objects stood silently in corners. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood, clay, and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang, like old stories, and then she saw him. An old man, his back to her, meticulously carving a piece of dark, gnarled wood. His hair was a wild, silver halo, and his hands, gnarled with age, moved with surprising grace. He seemed to embody the quiet, reflective atmosphere of the studio. He turned, his movements slow and deliberate, revealing eyes that were startlingly clear and deep, ancient pools that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed veneer. He wasn't overtly warm, but there was no judgment, only a calm, observant presence. "Lost?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. Elara felt a strange compulsion to tell him everything. "No, not exactly. Just wandering." She gestured vaguely at the art. "This is beautiful." He nodded, a slight curve to his lips. "They speak, if you listen." He motioned to a worn armchair near a window overlooking a small, wild garden. "You look as though you've been listening to too many of the wrong voices lately." Elara hesitated, then sank into the chair. The unexpected directness, devoid of pity, was oddly comforting. She found herself just sitting. Silas returned to his carving, the rhythmic scrape of wood on wood filling the silence. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a contemplative one. After a long moment, he spoke again, not looking up. "It's a heavy thing, an open heart, when it doesn't know its own strength." Elara's breath hitched. How could he know? She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just an artist, but a man who had clearly lived much, and seen much. Elara found herself drawn back to Silas's studio day after day. She didn't know why, exactly. He didn't offer advice in the conventional sense, and he certainly didn't pity her. Instead, he simply created, and occasionally, he would offer a cryptic observation or a metaphor, like pebbles tossed into a still pond, creating ripples of thought within her. One afternoon, Silas was working on a series of unsettling yet strangely compelling charcoal drawings. They depicted distorted figures, some hunched, some reaching, their faces obscured by deep shadows. "These are intense," Elara commented, a shiver running down her spine. Silas grunted, sketching another dark line. "They are the unseen. The parts of ourselves we deny, the parts we push away because they are not pretty, not convenient, not good. He paused, looking at her, his deep eyes piercing. "Do you know what the great Carl Jung called this?" Elara shook her head. "He called it the shadow." Silas picked up a small, smooth stone, turning it in his palm. "Imagine this stone. The part facing the sun is your conscious self, your kindness, your generosity, your desire to help. It's what you show the world, and what you believe yourself to be." He then slowly turned the stone over, revealing the underside, which was rougher, darker, unseen. But on the other side, always present, is the shadow. It holds everything you've deemed unacceptable, everything you've suppressed. Your anger, your jealousy, your selfishness, your fear of rejection, even your need for boundaries, your desire to say no. Elara frowned. But, why would I want to acknowledge those things? They sound bad. Silas chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. Not bad, child. Just unexamined. When you push them away, they don't disappear. They lurk. And sometimes, they exert their influence from the darkness, without your awareness. He looked at her pointedly. Like a kindness without boundaries, for instance. A kindness that becomes a burden. Elara felt a jolt. A kindness that becomes a burden. That was exactly what she was experiencing. But connecting it to something as primal as a shadow, it felt unsettling. She had always prided herself on having no shadow, on being pure light. The thought that she had these suppressed, darker aspects was deeply uncomfortable. It felt like an accusation, a flaw. So, she ventured, her voice small, "You're saying my hurt is because of my own shadow?" Silas shook his head slowly. Not entirely. But your vulnerability to that hurt, your inability to defend yourself against it, that often has its roots in what you've disowned. If you deny your own anger, you can't recognize it when it's directed at you. If you deny your need for boundaries, you won't set them, and others will simply step over them, perhaps even unconsciously. He picked up a large, unfinished wooden sculpture. Imagine a ship that is only built with sails. It catches the wind, yes. But what happens in a storm, without a rudder, without a strong hull? He looked at her, his eyes unblinking. It capsizes. Your kindness is a magnificent sail, Elara. But where is your rudder? Where is your hull?